Hello, hello, lovelies, and welcome to The Creeping Undergrowth. I'm Nemo, and this is episode 2 of the podcast. I think I have everything sorted. You would think with one person that this would be easier. Not really. But anyway, I hope you all are well this day. I hope you've been kind to yourselves. And I hope that you are able to listen and vibe with me and enjoy yourself. And with that, today's episode is going to be about childhood dreams and kind of how that's evolved with me growing up. And that actually comes from the TCU forum, Ask Plant Mother Anything. It was one of the questions submitted by you lovely beings. And before we get into that, I want to ask, have you taken a moment to get something to drink? Have you taken a moment to eat? Take medication if you need? Got up and stretched? Or did any movement that you're able to in your current position? Well, and apparently I am still sleepy. But if you've done all that, then we can move forward. Now, for me, I've thought a good bit on this because I not only had a lot of ideas ideas you'd kind of expect as a child, where it's very common for, children to want to become, a doctor or a veterinarian or an astronaut or, a scientist, like the big, up there types, the things that we see that are celebrated by society. And that a lot of those kind of stemmed and flowed for me, but I never stuck to one in particular. So I kind of wanted to expand that a little bit into things that I wanted growing up, not just as a child or as a young child, but also as a teen. And then things that I've ended up passionate about kind of as a result. And where we are today. So I'm starting out thinking the first thing that came to mind was the idea of working with animals. Now, there was the idea of the veterinarian. However, I am very much one who would have trouble with seeing and working with animals in, such wounded states or needing some of the situations that animals end up in that are going to end up, in your office, in your emergency room. My cat's trying to break into my room. Speaking of, but rambling aside, I had both very much an up and down kind of effect in that, if that makes sense. When I was little, like I'd say 9 or 10, my family very much had a household of accepting pets. I bring an animal home and we're going to try and save it type household. And there were a few years where we brought home pretty much anything, any animal that we found that, was injured in the neighborhood, from a small rabbit who had gotten attacked by a cat a bird that a dog tried to play with, black lab tried to play with it, and did not really realize at the time that in its excitement it had hurt the bird, and which was entirely accidental. Um, Poor pup felt so bad. Found a baby chipmunk at one point with 3 legs. There was a baby field mouse that, was orphaned. Like there were a lot of animals that we ended up bringing home. And while many couldn't end up, saved in the end, I still tried. Now, well, I think that that's definitely something that like I could handle in some extent today. For multiple reasons. I didn't want to, make that my career. Now, in the idea of childhood dream, most people tend to think or portray it as, careers overall. And I'm going to start there and then kind of span out. So in this case, we also had the idea of spacefaring or working in concept with space, whether that was with NASA, whether that was with, the idea of astronauts and the International Space Station, which I was enthralled by. But more so than, that I had a fascination, and I still do, by space. The vastness of it, the constant expansion of the universe, the way that gravity is affected through everything, since gravity is everywhere. The way that different planets and stars and body masses could, affect that, how stars are born and how they die, how black holes are created, and the fascination and strength, I guess, like literal strength that comes with them. And also in all of that, kind of the scope of how much we don't know. Because the universe is endless, it is massive, and it is ever expanding. And there's so much beyond us that even after, because humans have had a fascination with the, stars in the sky and how the world works for pretty much as most of the time we've existed. And that, I think humans are neat. As I lose my thought a little bit there, but I think humans are neat. But it does make us feel really small in, a massive scale. And I've always found that really, really fascinating. Now, I ended up not pursuing anything with that for a good while because if I remember correctly, and unfortunately my memory is shaky from my childhood, but from my understanding, I was promised essentially space camp by my grandfather who worked for NASA. And I don't remember if it was actually like a full camp event or if it was supposed to be something where he brought me into work, but promises were made. And then essentially I ended up being gaslit and written off. And it kind of crushed my overall interest in things for a while because I kind of got left behind after being promised a number of learning opportunities that I was very excited for. And while it's definitely not like the end of the world, those around me treated it as if it was just essentially a passing fancy, so it wasn't a big deal. And that very much affected me as a child and affected a number of other dreams as well. I wanted to become a singer at one point. And sadly, I kind of lost that early on because of judgments of my voice or how it worked with my character, or if I didn't sing a certain way. Now, I enjoy my voice nowadays, but different feel. And then, hi, cat. Lyra, why are you on my desk? Sorry, my cat just emerged from the depths of behind my monitors. We also had things like the military. I initially wanted to bring on the idea of this glory for the family kind of imagery that my family put forward. There was a lot of expectation to go into the military, and I liked the idea at first because I didn't really know any better. I wanted to be there to see my stepfather in his retirement. I wanted to, go off and see places. Essentially, a lot of the talking points that were sold are kind of what are used to draw people into the military who don't know any better. Because the military is heavy, no matter what job you work, whether it's an office job, whether it's boots on the ground, like there's a whole lot more that goes into it. And in a way, I think I was kind of saved by my disability on that front, due to an open heart surgery that I had when I was about 14. I'd say 13, but it was like a week before I turned 14. So I got recovery for my birthday, which I'm not mad about. But anyway, because of not only having had that heart surgery, but also, being disabled from it, and I didn't have an understanding of that and what that meant at the time. My family very much did well, you're healthy, you're fixed, so why aren't you, off running the Olympics, basically, unfortunately. But I was told pretty straight up that I would need to not only get to, a baseline of being able to start getting to the numbers of fitness and exercises and weights and so on for the military that would be expected, but I'd also have to kind of push beyond that to prove that I was able-bodied enough and fixed enough to make it. And I pretty much immediately gave up on that idea. I had a lot of guilt with it. I had a good bit of crying. And I had a good bit of bitterness as well, I think, because while I was, grieving an idea that I had and essentially this blown up passion that I had, I was also very much kind of gaslit by my family and put down for not fulfilling the dream that they had for me. And now I am very glad that I didn't go. I'm very glad that I didn't commit to that. I would not have made it just knowing what I do now. Like I said, I've been disabled for a very long time, but due to the way I was raised and understandings of the world that I had, and lack of knowledge overall, it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with the idea of disability and how it relates to me. And I'm still working with that. Anyone with disabilities or chronic illnesses or, just overall chronic fatigue, bye, cat. I'm sure that you all can relate in some way to the differences in the layers, I guess, of how understanding and relating your disabilities and how it affects your life comes about, especially because the way that our bodies feel and the way that things affect our bodies changes regularly. So whether you have a visible disability or an invisible one, it's essentially a full-time job on its own. And I also include this with, people who have detrimental effects from like, ADHD. Depression is in that, anxiety is in that. Um, there's a huge number of things that are included that a lot of people don't actually treat as such. But all of that said, that actually leads me to another point that I was thinking of. And this was something that in some ways I'm still interested in. However, I don't know. I don't think I'm actually in a position to make it a career so much. It's just something that I enjoy learning about. And with that, I want to give a trigger warning because this is going to bring up COVID. This is going to bring up talks of the Black Death or the bubonic plague and other plagues throughout history and some of their effects. I'm not going really in depth on it. That'll be for another episode, but I really wanted to gush about this for a minute. So that is, general warning there that I wanted to give a heads up for anyone who dislikes the idea of plagues overall or has trouble listening to things about, COVID and the basics of how it's affected the world. Like I said, I'm not bringing up any like super specifics, mostly just the concepts overall. Hydration is important. All right. So I think I've had interest in plagues, pandemics, and essentially things that affect humans on a large scale since I was very little. I remember having conversations with my great grandfather, who was a Christian professor. And something that I loved with him was he enjoyed teaching. He didn't just teach religion, he taught, the history of the areas that were brought up. He went and visited different areas, mentioned in the Bible so that he could learn about them and learn about their culture and learn, like, just expand his overall knowledge instead of keeping to the just straight ideas that are often taught when at least Christian religion is brought up. Now, all of that mostly aside, and the reason why I bring that up is because he would talk to me about Moses and the plagues, specifically, those that, were said to affect Egypt. And I wasn't interested in so much of the biblical impact. I wasn't so much interested in the story of Moses' life or the Pharaoh that, where his heart was hardened. I was more interested in the plagues that were said to have been unleashed on the area at the time, how that would have affected the people, how that would have affected the landscape, from locusts and pestilence on the livestock to how illness affected, the common people, to the death of the firstborn. Overall, all of that enthralled me because it was, honestly, so much. It was supposed to be, nation shaking. But I guess the ideas that went behind it, how it affected people, how it affected them moving forward, that was kind of more my interest in it. Now, my family did not share this interest, so I'm very thankful for my great grandfather for talking to me about it when I was young. Unfortunately, it was an interest that part of the reason I'm gushing about it now is because it was very stifled from me as a child. My parents found it incredibly disturbing, which, understandably, it is. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong to be interested. I'm speaking too much. I say on my own podcast. So, from the plagues behind Moses, there, in history at least that we know of, that, I lost my train of thought because I misread a part of my notes. Through the plagues and pandemics that have affected human history outside of a religious scope, there we go. That's where most of my interest comes in. I'm losing my thoughts because my notes are far too in depth for how my brain actually rambles. Now, while horrifying in scope and something that humans as a whole are never prepared to take on at the time of a new wave, it becomes proof time and again that humans are resilient and capable of continuing on after the break. This doesn't take away the horror or the grief or the weight of the gaps left behind. And as we've all seen with COVID firsthand, everyone is affected by it. No one comes out of that unscathed. And that said, we've still been able to, world's problems aside, we're still able to rebuild, to recover, and to grieve in time. And that, I think, is part of what interests me so much about humans and our ability to get back up and to move on. Doesn't mean we come out unscathed, does not mean that we come out untraumatized. I believe everyone has trauma related to COVID because of either how it affected us personally, how it affected those we were close to, or even how it affected the world and our understanding. Because when it comes to pandemics and, the idea of plagues, it is such a massive event and usually prolonged over years that it is outside of our real scope of understanding. Like, yes, we have the numbers. Yes, we can, have preventions in place, but that doesn't take away the kind of the awe-inspiring horror of it all, if that makes sense. Because we cannot truly imagine the millions upon millions of people that are affected by these throughout history. And that is almost impressive to me. Now, the plague that I tend to return to in reference most, and what I've actually seen a lot of reference to when it comes to COVID, is the bubonic plague or the Black Death. I haven't left myself enough time to really go super in depth with this, which is unfortunate on my part, but I will make that its own episode at some point. But a lot of my interest in general has focused on the bubonic plague or the Black Death throughout history. My memory problems make it a little bit difficult for me to actually hold on to a lot of that information. It means that I get to, relearn it and be reminded on a regular, which in its own way is kind of fun. It's also not only the most popular in media, as far as I know, when it comes to like movies, video games, literature, a lot of art, the idea of plague doctors, and how that idea has evolved throughout time. It's also one of the most widely impactful pandemics in human history, spanning between, 75 million and 200 million people. It took out a massive portion of the human population at the time. Now, part of my interest in that, and like I mentioned with COVID, is that one, we can look back on pandemics in history and use that to learn more about things today. But also, we've been able to kind of look back and study the Black Death and how the world was affected afterwards, especially to kind of predict how humans would rebuild and be affected accordingly, if that makes sense. So the way that communities end up getting together to rebuild, the way that governments end up reacting to events. Now, sadly, as an American, I can't say that, our entire handling of the situation was shit. But all that said, for a lot of the common people and those, I can specifically reference to those who have been generally mindful of, COVID. It's still heavy. There's still so much to go along with it. And even more than that, there's a lot of stress and trauma to deal with those who were willingly ignorant or turned away from the idea that it was actually happening, because some people wanted to believe, still want to believe so badly, that it was a hoax, despite the fact that we all know it happened. And again, that is another episode into willful ignorance and my interest in why people do that. Honestly, I think humans are fascinating, even when we are being stubborn and problematic, because there's reasons behind most things. Not everything, but most things. Anywho, that, I'd say, when it comes to like childhood dream overall, I think learning about like plagues and how they affected things and wanting to learn more about them and talk about them kind of brings me around to what I'm doing now. The ultimate thing that I wanted was to be able to create and to help others. And that's been a major focal point of kind of my existence for as long as I've been alive. I have always wanted to show kindness. I've always wanted to share the burden. I have always wanted to make sure that, even if it's just one soul that knows that they're not alone, then I've done it. I think that's where my childhood dream, as much as I spun around with, the idea of careers and things I wanted to do to impact the world and leave my mark, that's what I hope that it is in the end. Even if I'm not really remembered, even if I am, left behind overall by history and just return to the earth, that's okay. Because what I'm hoping is to be able to create in what is now becoming my streaming, where I hope to grow, and this podcast, where I hope to share my experiences and more. And I would love for things to take off. I would love for all of this to grow in a way where I could actually make it into a career. But all in all, my actual goals with this is to have a community to share with you, to help remind you that, it's okay to rest, and that it's okay if you're struggling, and that your experiences don't have to be better or worse than anyone else's. And even if you've given up on dreams in the past, or for those who get, often distracted or dismayed when you're trying to pick up a hobby or a craft, and You either get distracted and leave it behind, or you get frustrated because you're not doing so well. All of that is still valid, just as much as digging in, to something for years and making it into a talent of your own. Because, in my opinion, talent is learned, but which I think is contradictive of its point. But anyhow, all my rambling aside, that is my very long answer to what was your childhood dream. And now I actually have hit my 30-minute mark. To think I was worried. But I appreciate you all listening in. I really hope that you all enjoyed. And like it's always going to be, if you all have any questions for me, anything that you'd like to share or talk about, your childhood dreams, if you want to put those in the comments, I love to hear about them. Anything that you'd like to share, you can do it in the comments here. Or if you want to do it anonymously and have it shared, during an episode, in the description, there is the TCU form. And it's a Google form. It's anonymous. And you can fill it out as many times as you like. But I want it to be something where it can be a question for me. It can be something you want explained. It can be asking for advice. It can be an interest that you would love to see shared. I want to uplift myself and you wherever I can. And so, if you want to fill that out, please do. As for my care reminder of the day, because I want to do more of these, I personally enjoy them because I think help hopefully everyone who's listening. But hydration doesn't just have to be water. There's a whole lot of this idea that hydrate. You've got to drink enough water. You've got to, get enough of XYZ in. And there's a lot of, it can't be this, or it can't be that, or it can't be juice, it can't have too much sugar, so on and so forth. If you are putting fluids in your body, and that is what you can manage, that's enough. Whether it is tea, whether it is coffee, whether it is juice, whether it's flavored water. What matters is that you are getting fluids. Now, would I love to, dissuade from like energy drinks and soda and the like as your main source of hydration? Yes. But if that's what you can get down, so be it. Please do. And please be kind to yourself as you do. Because you are still feeding your body. I'm someone who usually needs some kind of flavored water or tea, whether that's packets or like flavoring packets, or whether that's juice, like cut with water, or just juice on its own. Anything of that sort. What matters is that, we're taking in fluids and we are feeding our body where we can. So that is my rambly care reminder of the day. And please, if you all like, please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'd love to keep, doing these and specifically get more of the word out because I'd love to share more. So please take care of yourselves. Please be kind to yourselves. And thank you for coming to the Creeping Undergrowth. I love these.